The CDC currently reports foodborne bacteria is causing the most illness in the United States. Roughly 1/6 of all Americans, 48 million to be exact, get sick. Out of those, 128,000 are hospitalized, and roughly 3,000 die of foodborne illnesses each year. The then director for the CDC, Tom Frieden, cited that most of the pathogens that cause these illnesses are from factory farming. In other words, the abuse of animals. When concentrating animal production into every intensive unit has severe implications for animal welfare. Annually, millions of animals that are raised for food experience horrible living conditions on industrialized or factory farming. These farms are and mostly profit-driven, which wants higher production numbers and efficiency rather than the quality as how these animals are raised. While views differ about the degree of comfort and freedom that farm animals deserve, most people can agree on a minimum standard of cleanliness and space. Yet the reality is that the basic structure of industrial farming is at odds with the most overall well-being of the animal they raise. I asked the general public what they know about these animals and where they come from. Do you have any concerns as to where your food comes from?
Yes, I do. I am concerned about where my food comes from because I want to make sure that the animal is healthy, and I want to make sure that it doesn't cause any type of illnesses after someone eats it.
I feel like a lot of our food comes from either animal cruelty or like some sort of human labor cruelty, some sort. And I feel like that's the problem with mass production, is that there are so many negative contributions in order to make our food.
Well, I'm assuming most of it comes from like farms and like factories and stuff, and just and where animals are raised to be killed and turned into food for humans.
So the industrial animal, genetically modified organism, GMO. So animals that are pumped with steroids or other genetically modifying drugs to either add more meat and less bones, but it's like not an organism. It's not like what if in the case of a chicken, genetically modifying it, can kind of make it not a chicken anymore in comparison to an actual chicken.
The Industrial Revolution sparked a population growth exponentially. In 1927, the world population reached 2 billion. With this growth, it led to the invention of nitrogen fertilizer for more grain production, which would be used to feed livestock. In 1960, it reached 3 billion. Due to the lack of space, animals were forced indoors and bred systematically. The spaces became more confined, and these animals regularly were vaccinated. Their touch to the outside world became limited and even diminished. Most of these animals go crazy, and some even die. All because of the unsanitary conditions that are provided by these farms.
Industrial animals, they're actually maintained for whatever purpose that organization may have. So if they have cows because they need the beef for hamburgers or steak, of course they process them. They give them sometimes antibiotics.
It was more of the processing of meat that bothered me. Say chickens, for example. There's hundreds of chickens crammed together in a very small space over some chicken wire. They do get pumped with chemicals to advance growth, and On top of that, some of them would get killed with it. It's like being, a crowd of people, saying, put in a context in the school, where our classrooms accommodate 30 kids, 30 students, and then you're putting 100 in there. We're not going to have enough space. So same thing with the chickens. They had so many in there, some of them would die.
Well, I like to believe that these animals that are being killed are raised under fair conditions, but that's not always the case.
When I saw other factories processing, I'm not sure if it was cows or pigs.
Both. Probably both.
Yeah, either or. What I saw was a carcass going down like a conveyor belt, and there was a guy who was some kind of an inspector, and he was basically, eyeballing the carcasses, looking for big cysts on the animals, and he was just jabbing them to pop it. So when I first saw that, I'm like, well, that's good. At least he's popping that so that I don't have to eat that. But then the more I watched it, I'm like, wait a minute. They're popping that, and this stuff was like oozing, like almost there's like a broken waterfall coming out of the animal, which would leave a trail for the carcasses behind it. So no matter what, whatever was coming out of the cysts, the pus, whatever germs, diseases that are in there, was being spread amongst the animals behind it.
Do you have any concerns as to where your food comes from?
Not really.
These conditions can bring about some very horrible side effects.
For example, with chicken, if it's not cleaned properly, especially the inside, there's a risk of salmonella. With beef and cow, mad cow's disease is pretty big. So there are different illnesses that you can contract depending on the animal.
Background information, I had to stop eating meat because it was very bad. And then on top of that, there was some other dietary restrictions that I was having an adverse reaction to. I have spinal issues. The meats in general, they have stuff in it that's it's an inflammatory, which is bad for someone in my condition with my back, with my spinal disc.
In addition, the FDA states that E. coli, which is fecal contamination, are present in 69% of beef and 92% in poultry and pork. These statistics were gathered from factory farming such as Purdue and Tyson Chicken. The farm animals, on the other hand, not inside the factory farming, have 2 times as less than that.
Its correlation just means we eat a lot of animals, so therefore when we get sick, it's like, yeah, these people all ate the animals because everyone eats the animals. But it's not necessarily saying the animals made them sick.
Sadly, the industry's biggest argument is that farming has to be this way, because it is the only way we can feed our world. This statement is wrong in all perspective. Obesity has been on the rise exponentially due to the overconsumption of meat. Too many farm animals can deprive our diet because crops grown will be fed to the animals mostly. There is also a negative impact on the environment. The biggest myth among the general public is that they assume chemicals are the biggest threat to food safety, which is simply not true because most foodborne illnesses are caused by biological contaminants such as E. coli, salmonella, and other viruses. Some food companies, to sell more of their products, go as far as to label their products as natural. This has no meaning to it. The FDA is still discussing where to draw the line between natural and unnatural. With all the faults of the meat industry, many people choose to go vegan. You're a vegan, right?
Yes.
Can you live without eating meat?
Absolutely.
Obviously.
I changed my diet to a vegan diet.
Oh,
So-
you're a vegan.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like recently.
I was looking for vegans.
A large part of that had to do with just how the meat is treated in this country.
People should at least be aware of where their food comes from before consuming it, because every item you buy in the supermarket, you have to remember the money that you pay them is a vote for what you want to see on the shelves and what you are supporting.
Despite all of this, there are alternatives. We can always choose to buy meat directly from farms and avoid eating processed meats, even from fast food restaurants such as McDonald's, Wendy's, and KFC. Most of all, we should put our taste interest in other foods such as fruits and vegetables and lower our consumption of meat.
A large part of the problem that we have with meats is that there's a big demand for it. And I believe that's partially chemical. So I can go on for days about this, but there's stuff that's put into the meat between cooking it, growing it, like whether it's industrial or farm, that gets a lot of us people chemically addicted to it.
Well, I tried. I actually do not eat meat on Fridays. Fridays I eat only fish, or some days I don't have any fish or any kind of animal product. I will actually have the fruits, vegetables, grains, things like that.
I personally eat halal, where it is required for these animals to be raised on an open farm and be slaughtered humanely. Even though it is twice the price of a typical processed meat, the benefit far outweighs for the halal meat. Just so you know, processed meat is the leading cause of cancer. All blame should be pointed at the meat corporations for corrupting the farm animals to the lowest quality of life, just for the sake of profits.
They treat animals in such terrible ways. Animals are cramped into spaces that they shouldn't be cramped into, and they develop diseases, whether it be from stress or from the environment that they're in, from the lack of hygiene, and the fact that they're killed, because I personally believe that humans shouldn't be the ones to choose whether or not an animal lives, basically because of their luxury of eating.
That was a great answer. Together, if we stand up against animal mistreatment and the greed of the meat industry by just saying no, imagine all the lives of the animals and the people we could improve. Imagine saving the 3,000 people who die of foodborne illnesses and preventing 128,000 people from being hospitalized. Imagine how much money it would save the government and the American healthcare sector. Together, if we stand up, we can have a healthier, prosperous nation.
Again, so, Mr. Tagash, what are you eating?
I'm up here.
Yeah.
Hi, what's your question?
So, what is it that you're eating?
I am eating something called quinoa mixed with beans, corn, peas, carrots, and spinach.
Does it have any meat?
Zero